Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Songwriters on Process podcast. My name is Benno Papari, and since 2010, I have interviewed hundreds upon hundreds of songwriters about the writing process. I have a PhD in English language and literature, and I'm a writer myself. So I've always been interested in treating songwriters the same way that we treat poets and traditional prose writers, as writers, plain and simple. There is no talk of how bands get their name, favorite tour stories, favorite foods, band drama, or anything else. This is an intelligent conversation about the writing process between two writers as we go deep, deep, deep into the writing process. That's it, nothing else. And with that, let's get into today's episode. And today on the pod, it is Orla Gartland. Last year, she released Everybody Needs a Hero, and a couple of weeks ago, she re-released Everybody Needs a Hero, but with 5 new tracks on it, so check that out. Gartland is from Dublin, although, as she says, she does now live in London, and I feel like I'm working my way through the Dublin scene. Within the past year, I've had on Green and Digo from Fontaines, D.C., James from the Murder Capital, and a couple of the gents from Inhaler on, so check those out if you'd like. But got a couple of quotes here that I like that she said. One of the ones is, "The more I do this, the less I want to understand where it comes from." As far as the process, kind of, I guess, not wanting to understand too much of what the process is because that can put too much pressure on you. And we did talk about that, but I guess the mystique of it, the allure of the mystique. But I love this quirky part of the process. She tries to walk to the tempo of the music she's listening to. I would love to see that. I mean, I guess various different tempos. She said she's a perfectionist, and it's frustrating when I'm 3/4 of a way through a song and I know it's not right. So we talked about how that perfectionism may affect her process, but I enjoyed this conversation a lot. She does say I feel like I've been talking a lot to songwriters recently about whether they're seasonal writers, and she said she absolutely is, although she does love to journal, and and that she says the tours are also a great place to gather ideas. That goes along with kind of seasonal part of the process. So anyway, Orla Gartland's new album is called Everybody Needs a Hero. I should say it was, again, released last year, but there are 5 new tracks on it. So check it out and check out my interview with Orla Gartland. I always start with a very simple question, and that is, do you think it's important to write in some fashion every day or not force it? I mean, a lot of songwriters say they use the term hibernation. They have writing seasons. Others say they've got to do something every day, regardless of how bad it is. So, where do you fall in that?
Very good question. Heavily debated internally for me. I am more of a seasonal writer when it comes to songs. I kind of do believe in the hibernation period, and I kind of believe in letting yourself like go fallow and not force output. That said, I've had periods where I've tried a spell of doing something every day, and I do think that that's quite a nice thing to turn on every now and then. So I've definitely set myself challenges in the past of trying to write a song every day or trying to write something every day. Um, but I'll do it for a month, for example. So it's not like I certainly wouldn't force it every day, and I find it really hard to write when I'm on tour. Some people are really into kind of, finding creativity in the like discomfort and chaos of tour. And for me, I find that a lot of the non like on stage time on tour is more about just like fulfilling basic needs like showering and eating. I think I'm a bit more of like a sim on tour, and there's not a huge amount of space for creativity and like processing. But I find usually when I come back from a trip like this and I have the headspace and the time, I almost have this like lag and usually tend to have like a rush of ideas or even just processing the like vast amount of experiences and life lived on the trip. But in the moment, I sort of prioritize finding vegetables and just like basic survival. So to answer your question, I am generally more of a seasonal writer, but I believe in running the tap every now and then by a period of trying to write every day. or just set various challenges, a song a week. I do a thing on Patreon. I've done it for 7 years called my Secret Demo Club, where I put out a demo every month, and that is like something I found really valuable. Even though that's not every day, it's like even if I'm not in a songwriting era, I have to write at least one thing every month, and there's an audience there waiting to receive it. So that has become a hugely valuable like accountability for me.
Okay, a couple of follow-ups. I mean, do you wish you could write every day? Because sometimes people say, "I don't, but I wish I did." Or do you, I guess, do you deliberately not write?
I don't deliberately not write. I've become more of like a journaler in the last like really only in the last year. I've always felt like quite sad that I didn't keep a diary when I was younger. Because I feel like, particularly when you're a teenager, I feel like you're having like so many fast, potent feelings that just feel unbelievably massive at the time. And I remember remnants of that, but I really wish I had a diary, and I'm always quite jealous of friends that like really religiously kept that. But I think I get this with songwriting or just with any kind of writing. Like my biggest enemy is sort of the blank page and the pressure of like perfections straight off the bat. And so I think that's why I've always felt that keeping a diary and that kind of casual train of thought type writing in the past I found it really hard because it's the when that's good, when that kind of writing is good and therapeutic and useful, is when it's really not written with an audience in mind. Whereas I think I have a tendency to like think that I'm going to be like some version of Anne Frank and that I'm going to keep a diary and someone's going to read it one day. And so I'm writing it through the lens of like an audience, and that's preventing me from like being honest, which I think is, for example, like the value in that kind of writing, if that makes sense. So anyway, I'm sidetracking a little bit. I started doing the artist's way about a year ago. I didn't even see it through, but the idea, thinking of a journal more as like morning pages, and it being loose and fast and not something with an audience in mind, just something to like brain vomit. Um, that is kind of what helped me remove my pressure for perfection. And I just think of it as morning pages all the time rather than journaling, even though arguably what's the difference? Um, but yeah, it is interesting. I do wish I instinctively wrote a little bit more. I do think sometimes I have to be like, oh yeah, I remember this is part of my job. I should probably try and make something out of nothing today, you know?
So is the journaling separate? Do you ever go back to the journal for song ideas? Because some people do that, others deliberately separate them. Uh,
I'm trying with the journaling. Like I said, it's only I've done it fairly regularly over the past year for the first time in my life, and I'm trying not to read it back because, like I said, I don't want to write it with that in mind. I'd like to read it back at some point in the future, but I'm trying not to analyze it like as I go because I fear that will stop me being honest if I write it if I write it thinking that I'm reading it back in a couple weeks time or that someone else will find it and read it, then it'll all become like a bit posh, you know what I mean? It'll all like start to it'll start to get performative. And I don't and you when I write songs because it's my job, there's a sense of, yeah, if this song gets published, like there will be people who hear it. And so because I'm thinking of songs in that way, like somewhat through the listener's ear, that's why the journaling has to be like sacredly not that. So no, I haven't minded for song ideas yet. But all that said, like what I'm, and I find this particularly with my secret demo club because it's once a month. Whatever I'm thinking about or going through in that time is naturally bled across without having to cross reference. Whatever it is that's on the front of my mind is always in both the journals and the songs. So it kind of happens, I'd say, pretty effortlessly. But both are just whatever's like swimming around my brain, and then that's kind of like sort of a little Rolodex of like, you know, what's going on, and there will be different month to month, but it'll always mirror, I think.
so do you write well? Because with the song, is it a song a month? I'm familiar with the Patreon, but it's a song a month, right?
But yeah, so the thing I'm doing is a demo every month, once a month,
Yeah.
everyone gets it. Um, yeah,
I was going to say, like, when I was writing my dissertation, I found that it was difficult to envision, oh, this thing is due in a year, because that's when that's how long you have to write this thing. But I bought this book called Your Dissertation on 15 Minutes a Day. And it wasn't this like new agey kind of thing. It was like, if you look at it as 300 pages, you'll never get it done. But if you look at it as 10 pages a week for 30 weeks, that's pretty easy. And so I write well. Like, I will create a false deadline for myself. So like,
oh,
if my wife and I are going out at 6, I deliberately won't start writing until 4, because I
yeah,
know I have to stop. So I found that to be like, that's why planes are so great for me, because, or trains, because I have to stop at some point. So I guess that's my long way of saying, do you find that you write well under deadline generally?
I do, and every single month, and I kind of curse myself for it because it's a bad habit in one way, but every single month with the demo a month with the Patreon specifically, I'm not thinking about that till often the 28th, even though I know that I have to do it every month. And every time I go away on tour, we've been away for a full month now, and there's so many every single time I think, I could knock out 2 demos in 1 month and relieve the pressure of the following one. Like, in theory, I know I could do that. I literally never do, and I know now that I never will. There's something I think a self-inflicted deadline is good, and I do a similar thing where I think the least inspiring thing is, like, a day to do creative work, like, the kind of open-endedness of that, both the open-endedness of the day and the schedule and the time, and also the open-endedness of, like, the crisp blank page of the notebook with infinite blank pages after it. Like, neither of those things get me going. There needs to be, like, some obstacle. Like, a couple of years ago, I was, like, broke in London when I first came, and I had to work at a cafe, which was totally fine and actually really fun. But I remember being surprised at how much writing I did when I had a part-time job. Because again, the same sort of idea, like, knowing that I had to work, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, I found on those other days that I was trying to make way more of them than when I've just, like, had quiet periods of full-time music. That's often when I get the least amount done. So I think obstacles in the day, schedule-wise, or a looming deadline, yeah, I do work well under that kind of condition for some reason. I always have.
It's why when people, and we have kids, and it's when people are parents, when songwriters become parents, ironically, they get more done, because when the kid goes down for a nap, you've got 1 hour, and you'd love to say, "Oh, I just want to relax," but "Oh shit, I got an hour," and it's amazing how much they can get done in that hour if they know that, for the net, they're once the baby wakes up, they're done. So it's kind of that same thing, like you were saying, when you're busy, you can often get more done creatively.
Yeah, and you're also living more life and having more experiences, and I think this kind of goes back to the first question you asked about the hibernation. I think life lived is important, and I think having having too much time to do music and kind of, I don't know, you just can't. I'm quite a methodical person, and I did like school, and I liked the shape of it, and I liked the structure, and how open-ended a creative job like being a songwriter or an artist is something that I do struggle with at times, and I hate that. And I guess this is true of loads of creative jobs, but, like, you can't really, like, knuckle down to it in quite the same way. Like, you can clear out your diary, you can you can lock yourself in a room all day. I have a really nice little kind of studio writing space in London now. It's got a piano, it's got drums, it's perfect. But I can lock myself out, cancel all my social things, and sit in that room for weeks. And it's not really like doing homework, or you know what I mean? It's like I find that that is actually not what's gonna make something like song ideas come, and they're just much more it's just much more unruly and hard to predict, and hilariously, like, when I'm most kind of frazzled and busy and I'm on the train, like, that's where the good ideas come, not when I'm, like, in a suitable music space with access to an instrument and a notebook. It's like It's when my mind is slightly distracted by something else, cleaning, cooking, traveling. That's where the like little seeds come. And I can develop the seeds in a more kind of quiet space, but that it's very hard for me to get the initial ideas when it's too still and too, well, I'm trying too hard, I guess.
I was going to ask this anyway, but since you brought it up, so one of my favorite quotes, I've got some quotes from authors over here. One of my favorite quotes is from Agatha Christie. And Agatha Christie famously said, "The best time to write a book is when you're doing the dishes." So the number of times I hear songwriters say, like you said, they get ideas when they are cleaning, doing the dishes, gardening. Uh, I had Lauren Mayberry on. Yeah, Lauren Mayberry told me chopping vegetables, which I think is terrifying to do. Like that to me requires attention. Um, but vacuuming, any of that stuff, and so the thinking behind that, which is why we get our best ideas in the shower. The thinking behind that is that when your brains are engaged in an activity that requires no conscious thought, that's when those eureka moments happen. So I'd love to explore that with you. It sounds like that happens a lot.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely my experience. And like I said, I kind of think of them as like, I always just call them the seeds for some reason, but like that's where the best like seeds come from. It's hard to like develop an idea when you're mid vacuuming, but actually developing an idea is not the hardest thing. The most like spooky, witchy, spiritual, hard to explain part of songwriting, I think, is the initial comes out of nowhere. That's a cool lyric. That would be a cool melody. That's a cool beat. That's a cool rhythm. That's the shit that you just I can't explain. That's the and I don't want to explain it. The older I get and the more I do this, the less I want to understand where ideas come from because you'll just psych yourself out. I'm just grateful when they come. And I'm quite into the like, I'm not that spiritual a person, but I'm really into the like, you become a vessel for your ideas. Like, I think some people hate that idea because it maybe is like bad for the ego, like that your ideas have this like otherness and that you haven't like worked really hard. I think having things drop into your head is like there is an otherness to it. And I think the skill comes in the next part, which is like, okay, well, you've got a lyric idea, but like what do you do with it? That's the bit that you can that's the craft, I think, to like hone and figure out how to do it in your own unique way. But the initial like idea drops out of the sky and now it's in your brain, that is it, there is an otherness and like I can't explain that bit. And I'm happy to not be able to understand it.
It's a fine line though, because you want to put yourself in those positions to be able to get in those moments, which is why I'll go for a walk or something like that. But then it becomes meta because if you start vacuuming, then you're thinking, okay, here are the ideas going to come now.
Yeah.
The second you start to recognize it, it's like having insomnia. You start to you can't sleep because you start to think about why you can't sleep.
Yeah.
Um, and writer's block is the
Self
same way.
out. If I wig myself out and I'm doing like a day of solo writing and I go, okay, well, between 10 and 12, I'm gonna go for a walk, go for a coffee. I'm gonna hope that some ideas like drop in this period of time. It's like anything. If you can really psych yourself out of it, and that is annoying. It's what I find hard sometimes about co-writing because when you involve another person, you have to decide that you're going to start at X time and end at X time. It is just inherently more organized. You have to decide, like, we're going to meet in a studio at 11 a.m. and we're going to have until 5. And we're going to hope that in that time, one of us or both of us have ideas that we're coming in with or that just appear in that moment and that we'll have the kind of synergy together to be able to like muddle through it and come out with something at the end. And I don't haven't done co-writing for a while. I did a lot of it when I first came to London and it was good for me to do. I wrote loads of awful music, but it was like a real education in like seeing how other people write songs, seeing what parts of that I wanted to take forward for myself. Um and yeah, some of the worst experiences that I remember were being with someone and realizing at about 3 p.m. in the day that it wasn't happening, but like needing to push through it. realizing there was like something where it wasn't coming together naturally. But it's when creativity in my experience has felt most like a sort of office job, you know. You're just like really squeezing your brain to try and like make it through. Whereas if I'm by myself and I'm writing and I get to that point, I can just put it down. I can just go and do something else and return to it 2 weeks later, you know? So yeah, I agree that it's a hard thing to like chain in. And I like I said, as a kind of methodical person who likes to like work hard, it's hard to apply that same logic to songwriting because it's so mysterious and it refuses to be like reined in the same way as like doing kind of admin work.
So I have a David Byrne quote up here, and David Byrne said, "A car is a good place to write lyrics. Driving occupies one part of the brain, freeing up the other." A
Mm.
little bit of what we're talking about, but the difference now is that locomotion. Um, that do you ever find that you may get more ideas or different ideas when you're walking versus if you're in on the train?
Mm.
Or I mean, I think we could go a million ways in this. Like, is there the difference between self locomotion, excuse me, or having someone else quite literally in the driver's seat? Do you ever notice, are those fruitful times for you in general too? The movement part of it.
100%. I've noticed it more. Been trying to I've been thinking so much about like walking pace and like what kind of songs and rhythms and tempos feel good to walk to. And I find myself always when if I'm walking and listening to music, I will always try and walk to that tempo. It probably looks like psychotic, but I just find it really satisfying. And then sometimes it's like just a little too fast or just a little too slow and I'll give up. But I'm interested by the kind of like psychology of like, especially when you think of a song receiving its like at the end of its cycle when you've released it and there's like an audience and someone's putting your album on and listening, a song that's like really good to walk to or to run to or to dance to is like a really precious thing or to drive to. Like I've driving music is like a genre in itself, but then like driving in like rainy, rural, you know, England is very different to like driving in LA on a highway down, you know, or cruising through Malibu. It's like those are different genres of driving songs. But yeah, of course, yeah, the motion regard I agree the type of motion and whether it's like whether you're controlling it or reacting to it feels like it does affect the ideas and like driving or walking, just driving, I guess, to some degree is both reactive and you're yourself, but like you are kind of, especially with walking, like you're deciding what pace to go at. Whereas with a train, you're sat there and it's moving at whatever speed it's going to move at. So yeah, I think whether it's like whether the ideas that come up are like reactive to what's around you or like self kind of driven is very interesting to me and something I've been thinking about a lot the last few weeks.
I have had songwriters tell me they've written songs while on walks or on hikes, and the song that they wrote ends up being the cadence, mirroring the cadence that they were moving. So I have heard that. But now here's my other question, and I think that you'd get a different song. I mean, I don't say how you could write a song if you're in a car and you're in the London traffic or LA traffic, but if you're driving in a familiar place where your brain again, if it's a place you've driven to a million times, your mind can wander and you don't
Mm,
have to focus quite literally on the cars around you.
mhm.
So I wonder if that would make a difference too. And then there's the question of, like you said, driving in the countryside. Is that going to give you different? I mean, there's so many ways because again, I think your brain has to be, you can't be focusing on things or else you can't focus on the creativity part of it.
Yeah, there has to be a certain amount of like idle brain to for any of it to work. And it's funny again because I'm such a like methodical person by nature. When I hear you talk about these things, I want to like set up loads of experiments and I want to go home and try driving in these different places. But the same thing applies as what you said in that if you just try too hard, it's not going to happen. You have to just live your life, do your silly little errands, do your non-songwriting things, and allow writing opportunities and ideas to kind of like seep in around them. And I really struggle with that. I wish you could will it a bit more, but I just don't think you can. And in my experience, when you try, you really try and push it out, it's just a bad time, you know?
So I interviewed the writer Anthony Doerr about 10 years ago, and he won the Pulitzer Prize for this amazing book called All the Light We Cannot See. And I asked him about writer's block. And I'll never forget this. He said, I don't believe in writer's block. He's called it a failure of courage.
Mm.
And the idea that just don't be afraid to write the bad stuff. Writer's block happens not because you don't know what to say, but because you're afraid to start. So, and I'd love to get your take on that. I mean, is writer's block a thing, or are you okay with just writing crap at the outset?
I mean, alright, I'm a perfectionist, so, like, it's frustrating to me when I'm, like, 3/4 of the way through a song and I realize that it's not my best. That does annoy me, but I think there's always something in seeing it through, and I think what you'll stand to gain from pushing through is a little bit hard to reckon with in the moment. Like, when I wrote the album that I put out last year, Everybody Needs a Hero, it's the only time where I've, like, had a album title or, like, idea for the whole record first, and that was, again, like, quite dangerous because I didn't wanna force it, but I really wanted to get this, like, this notion of, like, a hero into the song or into the imagery because I was just kind of thinking about it a lot of the time and how it related to, like, specifically thinking about how it related to being a woman and some like a behavior I observed in myself and a lot of the women around me was this kind of manic spinning of plates, like um, wanting to excel in all areas at once, having all the tabs of your brain open at once, wanting to be a great friend, great partner, thriving at work, working out loads, but also really chic and candid and chill. And it's like this mad kind of pressure and expectation that I could see myself like succumbing to and also watching in a lot of the women around me. And so this idea of this like self-appointed kind of bootleg DIY superhero, like help running around manically trying to help everyone else but themselves was something that was like just swimming around my brain. And so wanted to get this hero thing in, didn't want to force it, felt like there was lots of different ways it could go that would be awful, both visually and in the music. And so it was just going about writing the songs, and I wrote like 2 or 3 songs that had like lyrics about heroes. There was one called Wear the Cape. There was, and they were kind of, in my opinion, pretty mid. And like some of them I wrote on my own, some of them were in sessions with friends, but I was definitely like trying and then seeing all of them through, but like it wasn't clicking. And then I kind of got the idea that I was just kind of flogging a dead horse, trying too hard. Never mind, it's not the end of the world. Um, but then the fourth or fifth attempt, um, like worked a treat. I started with the title, and I was really clear in my mind of what I wanted to say because I had done a really windy job of it in the previous songs. I had done this like meandering version of what I was trying to say. And then by the time I got to that fourth or fifth attempt, I was just like clear as day. I just wanted to say things in a very direct way. And I didn't want it to be complicated or clever in the same way as the previous attempts were. So I didn't see that at the time. At the time, I was just frustrated and thought I had an idea that wasn't very good and that I didn't, and that I should just give up on. But the previous attempts of like just running the tap were like integral to the end product. So that's what I mean. It kind of works in mysterious ways, but I understand the value in like pushing through and seeing things through, even if they don't ever end up seeing the light of day, because they'll inform something that does. And that's the good stuff, I think, but you have to have patience, and it's in the moment, it doesn't, in the moment, you don't have that clarity, or I haven't, you don't have
So
perspective until way after the fact of why all those other songs didn't work.
that's what I was going to say. So do you have somewhere just piles and piles of discarded song ideas that you'll revisit from time to time and see if, oh, it didn't work then, but let me look at it now. Maybe something will happen and I'll get a breakthrough.
Honestly, very rarely. Like, I kind of believe now in like if it didn't work the first time, that may I believe in believing that you'll have continue having good ideas, if you know what I mean. I think a dangerous place to get to is believing that you'll never write anything good again. And that's when I start going back through old voice memos, trying to make something from 3 years ago work. I think in general, unless I'm really set on it, I try not to do that. I'm much more excited about trying to write something new most of the time.
You are in the unbelievable vast minority of the songwriters I've interviewed who have that opinion, which is
Yeah.
interesting. Oh, yeah. I
People
mean,
just try and make it work. That's
I,
interesting.
I have, I mean, I've had 4 or 5 interviews in the past month where people have said, "Oh, there's a song on the on this album that I started 25 years ago." Uh, Literally, yeah,
But I think if something does stick with you for that long, there's definitely something to be said for it. Like if you think that it has something to give that it didn't before and you just have like a gut feeling about it, I think that is good. I guess how I interpreted your question is just like when you're fearful that like the ideas that you've had in the past are like the only good ideas that you've had, like that feel when you're doing it out of fear, then that feels like a bad place to be. But if you're doing it because you think, God, this thing I wrote 8 years ago is like really got something to it, and you just feel it in your belly, like that, I can understand that a bit more. Like that is kind of interesting. If you can't stop thinking about it, like there has to be a reason for it, right?
that's true. So let's talk about these voice memos because songwriters tell me they have thousands of voice memos and there's no organization to them whatsoever. And they just scroll frantically through them occasionally. So, is there any sense of organization to those?
I do have definitely have about 5,000 on my phone. Yeah, I'm a kind of a mixture. I have, yeah, 4 or 5,000 on there. My method is that when I'm in a situation where I don't have internet, so like on a plane, I never buy the Wi-Fi. I don't care if I have work to do. I don't want anyone to reach me. And the same on the tube in London, like the underground. I know that you can get online. It's not right to be online down there. There are some places where we must be impossible to reach. And then if I have energy and I'm on my phone but I can't get online, that's when I organize my voice memos. And that's when I go through and I delete all the like I don't know, the 3 if I have some idea, it's like I probably have recorded it 3 times and the third one is the one. I'll go back and I'll delete the other 2. Usually I'll name whatever's there. So yeah, it's kind of like I intermittently organize them, and the old ones are kind of organized, but uh, at any one moment there's a couple hundred that are unnamed and hard to navigate.
When it comes to lyrics, are you a pen and paper person or a computer person?
Total hybrid, honestly. Like I'd like to be more analog than I am. I think sometimes I like the ability to reword quickly, like digitally. I think that is like it feels kind of yeah, it feels more reactive, doesn't it? You're like, oh no, that's not the word. Backspace, done. Um, so yeah, on total hybrid. But probably more the Notes app than the Notebook generally, which I don't like because I think the Notebook is so much more romantic.
It's not just that, but I feel like if you go back and see things that you wrote, you're able to put yourself in that space emotionally easier.
Mm,
At least I am.
handwriting, yeah. I mean, handwriting tells you so much. You can tell whether you were in a rush or if you were really taking your time. You can see when you've crossed things out. Like all of that is kind of embalmed in it when it's written down, isn't it? Um, and it's sad. I mean, in general, it's crazy how little we write down now. I don't know if you ever had that experience where you just like haven't written in a while, then you have to sign something physically and you're like, I feel like a toddler and I don't know how to write my name. It's like pretty spooky. So yeah, it's always my like New Year's resolution. And it often falls by the wayside, but I would like to physically write more.
And I love because people fall into two camps when they write with a pen and they have to cross something out. Do they either just put a single line through it or they scribble furiously? In fact, Lily from Beach Bunny told me I had her on last month. She said, and her quote was, I scribble into oblivion because that thing that she doesn't like, she never wants to see again. So she frantically
Wow.
crosses it out.
I'm totally the opposite. I think the beauty of like writing like actually writing is being able to see the precursor. Like yeah, always one line for me. Depends what it is. If it's like a birthday card or something, I don't know. If I'm writing a birthday card, I will write it out on my notes app first, and then I will write it down because I want that to be perfect. That's for someone else. But if it's like songwriting or journaling, like I kind of want to see the word that I rejected for some reason.
See, I'm a scribbler because when they tell you when you take standardized tests, they tell you the answer you know that is wrong, block it out completely so you never even have
So
to
it's
look
like a
at it again.
school hang on. Yeah, I get that.
Okay, two more questions. So we had talked about Christian Lee Hudson, and I've got a
Mhm.
quote from him up here that he told me, and I wrote this down because I love it so much. He said, "My biggest hurdle as a writer is trying to hack my brain to become less critical,"
Oh, yeah.
as he writes. So are you yeah, we discussed this a little bit, but is that ever something that you struggle as you're writing? Because I think you did say word vomit, which I hear some people say. Um, but is it hard to be less critical when you write?
Yeah, I think there's a time and place in the writing process to be critical. When I think of critical, I think of um approaching it as the listener, right? Trying to listen or read what you've written or recorded through the outsider's ear, right? Trying to understand what the general public or even a specific person will think. I always think it's really telling when you make a demo and you play it for someone else. The experience of listening with them is always different. And I think there's something useful about working and analyzing critically, but you don't want to have that too soon. That's what I have found. It's like I think there's a time and place for like outside perspective, even if it comes from you, but you want it to be like in the final 20% of the writing, not like as you write the initial thing. And if you have the critical eye or ear right from the beginning, it's like locking yourself in a cage and wondering why you're not moving around very much. Like it's a prison of its own making. So I think shutting down the critical voice, just like Christian said, is the mission. Trying to tune into like, I'm doing this for me. I'm doing this for me, and I'll try and get it as fully formed as you can. And then at some point you can go, "Ooh, I wonder if this could be better." I'll tuck it in at the sides. Oh, this is a little long. It's a little indulgent. Like, there's a time and place for the critical um, writer, but I think it's just like trying to push that stage as far down the road of the process as you can. And that is something I do find quite hard. I think I'm like quite an empathetic person. I wouldn't go as far as say people pleasing. It might be in my nature, but it's my life mission to become less like that. And so same with writing, like I don't want to be writing for the listener. Or if I do consider them, I want it to be at the end.
I had Matt Nathanson told me that his version of it is he calls it the assassin, and the assassin is that thing on his shoulder that he's battling as he writes. The assassin is telling him, "Don't write that, don't write that," and it's like an actual battle. And I think we all have that. It's that idea of, should I write this, and or should I just spill it all out initially and then go back? I mean, my fear as a writer is that if I don't get everything out initially, part of it is just anxiety. That if I don't get everything out initially, I'm going to forget it. So I'd much rather get it all out. I mean, this is prose writing, not songwriting for me, but I'd much rather get it all out so I can go back and then decide if it should be in there rather than making that decision as I write.
Yeah. And I find as well, and this is kind of much more like holistic than it is about writing specifically, but in my experience, like that, how loud that critical voice is almost always mirrors like how I feel in myself. If I'm going through like a confident period of like really feeling myself, then that voice is quite quiet. If I'm feeling anxious, self-aware, like me as a person or me as an artist, I don't matter, whatever that kind of mean voice is, then the critical voice in the writing is very, very loud. So it kind of, I think it goes a long way as a creative person to look after yourself mentally, like do all the things that are nothing to do with songwriting because there is an amount of ego required. Like in order to finish a song, you have to believe that that you have a voice or that you deserve to make things or that you like that there is value in what you're making. And if you if you don't if you think so little of yourself that you don't want to take up any space, then you're not gonna you're not gonna sit and write a song, and you're certainly not gonna wanna put it on the internet or put it out or stand on stage and sing it. So it's kind of an interesting thing. It's much more like holistic, I guess, than like actual writing. But yeah, you have to believe before it even exists that there's like value in it, which is kind of hard when you think about it.
Yeah, I love that. So, are there any? I forgot to ask you this. Are there any? I have some quirks in my process. So, for example, if I write in this chair, I'll revise in that chair behind me. Like I never write and revise in the same place, or the same chair. I'm a morning person. Certain things I have to have with me. I just finished reading the Fleetwood Mac. It's a book on Fleetwood Mac, and it's insane. It's called Dreams, and it's all about like the band, but their crazy process. And there's a story about when Lindsey Buckingham wrote "Not That Funny," and to sound angry when he was singing. This is crazy, but to sound angry when he was singing, he was doing push-ups, and they had the mic taped to the floor, and so he would be singing as he was doing push-ups to sound angry.
I
Um,
like that.
isn't that I was like, "Could you imagine?" He said, "Yeah, I would need it to be right next to my mouth so that every time I come down," and if you listen to the song, I was like, "That totally makes sense." Now, I don't know if you're that quirky, but I have certain quirks. So is there anything are you a morning person? Is there a certain chair you like to sit in? How much does that matter to you?
Yeah, quite a lot, and quite a lot in the recording process more, like, all of that holistic way of thinking. There's a producer that I worked with on the record that I just did, a co-producer called Pete Miles, and he's kind of the closest I've ever worked with producer-wise to, like, a Rick Rubin, where he's technically very amazing, but he's much more a spiritual guru of, like, and he's all about these holistic sides of, like, how different your vocal will sound if you record it in the morning versus in the evening after dinner with the lights dimmed and one drink in, like you're going to be infinitely more relaxed than if you decided you're going to get up at 10 a.m. and do it first thing and your voice is croaky and you get in your head about it. So I've learned a lot from him when it comes to the actual like recording and putting it down, how much that does count, particularly with vocals, but kind of with all of it. He's very into um, yeah, not trying to cram too much into the day, the importance of the, like, slow morning or the slow dinner or the conversations you have in between and, like, trying to create an environment that doesn't feel too much like work so that you're hopefully just having a nice time, and then also you're just going in and crushing a drum take because you weren't even thinking about it, and then back we go to, like, drinking a beer together or whatever. It's like, he's really nailed that, and hilariously, like, when I'm in his studio, I get so much done even though there's so much, like, socializing and non-music things happening, or, like, going for a walk at 4 PM, like, my little busy body, like, productive brain is like, "We can't I'm paying for the studio time. I don't wanna take an hour out of the day to walk." Like, that doesn't make any sense, but it's like, "Oh, but it does because the evening that you'll have after that will just feel completely different. Everyone's head will be clear," and I don't know. Yeah, so definitely some of those in the recording. In the writing, like, as well, for sure, I'm definitely a morning person. I think the, like, hope and the promise of a new day is, like, a very powerful thing. I'm not really a night owl at all when it comes to creativity. I'm definitely more of, like, an early riser, early thinker. Yeah, and I find the end of if I'm doing a writing session with someone else, I find the tail end of it really hard because I just yeah, my brain starts to, like, roll off at, like, 5 PM. I can't really do, like, night sessions.
You have a favorite chair? Does that matter to you?
I don't I've never had a favorite chair. I have a nice kind of sort of, I don't know, nerdy, probably quite ergonomic chair in my studio, but it's like it's not an inspiring chair. It's just more like that's more like if I had an office job, this is the kind of chair I should sit in for my back. You know what I mean? That's not very inspiring. I do have a thing about like not being pretzeled up when I'm doing any kind of work or even writing, like I do have to be like sat up straight. So it's not a specific chair, but I really hate an environment where my like shoulders are hunched or my notebook or my laptop is like too low. I think I get a bit weird about that. But not a specific chair, not yet. Maybe I just haven't found my dream chair.
I had the songwriter, singer-songwriter Samantha Crane on a couple weeks ago, and she said that she likes to sit in the corner of the room at the dining room table so she has a view of the whole room. So every day it's like a new mood board in front of her.
Mm.
And I thought that was really interesting. Like she needs to have that expansive view in front of her for inspiration rather than like hunched over a desk where you can't see anything.
Mm. God, I love all this stuff.
I know, isn't that cool?
So people are so weird.
Yeah. Oh,
But in the
yeah.
best way. It's just
Uh,
funny, whatever gets you there, it's like, it's good, you know?
I mean, the stories, when I asked that question about chairs, I mean, I could tell you endless songwriters. Carrie Brownstein from Slater Kinney, she said that she writes on this like $100 shitty couch she bought on Craigslist
Mm.
because she wants it to be as cheap a piece of furniture as possible. But that place has been gold for her for inspiration because she wants to make the process as less precious because it's less pressure if the things around you aren't precious.
I think there is a lot to be said for that. Like I quite early on in being in London, I did a kind of writing camp in this studio called Rack, like a big flashy studio in northwest London. It's near Abbey Road. It's a similar kind of big grand studio. It's really expensive to be there. Not a kind of place I would ever be able to even record my music in. I just wouldn't be able to access it or afford it. But I did this writing camp that was there 5 days, different groups of people set up in these like iconic rooms. And, oh, Elton John played that piano. And it's like all these people are on the wall. That is the least inspiring space you could possibly imagine. I hate it. Like, it's a lovely studio and you want to go and record your strings there and like take loads of videos or record your choir. But like in terms of writing something from scratch in a space like that has all this history, it's like that is the worst. That is the worst. I can't think of anything worse. And it didn't work for anyone on that camp. It was like the novelty of being in that space was really exciting, but it didn't affect the work in a good way. So I do think there's a lot to be said for being in a space that doesn't feel too posh or pressured, and like even a space with a lot of musical history in it, I'm not really sure if that is a good thing. Because it's like you don't want to be thinking about how much you have to live up to. Otherwise, you're going to pen your verse and be like, well, it's not as good as Elton John. And Elton John was playing this piano. So, yeah, the $100 chair or like the kind of rickety environment or the charming, unpretentious writing room, I think that is a real skill. And I see it a lot. Like my dream, like a lot of people's dream, is to have like a garden with a studio in the back, right? A separate building, because it's like it's not in the house. You've got some separation, but it is there and it's yours. And at the moment, I rent a space, and it'd be nice to not do that forever. But I know a huge amount of people who see that dream through, and then they build their dream home studio or dream garden studio. They spec it up like to the nth degree. They've thought so much about the acoustic paneling and the perfect wooden desk, and there's months of planning, and then they see it through, and then they sit in it to work for the first time, and they're like, it's the most daunting thing ever, and they just can't write anything because it's just way too perfect.
That would be the worst because you have to create. I mean, you spent all that money and you'd feel like a failure.
Help but think about the fact that it's your job and you spent all this money and spunked your friggin' publishing advance on this like 50 grand, whatever it is, it's like, it's just funny. So I think having to be like reactive, having to squash into a room that's smaller than you'd like, having to share a space, having like all of these things are actually probably quite good, because when you have full reign, unlimited budget, unlimited options, and you make all those choices, like might be a nice room to sit in, but is that like really where your best ideas will come from? Like probably not. It's so weird.
And that's it for today's episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget, you can find all the episodes on all major streaming platforms and also at the Songwriters on Process website. That is at songwritersonpodcast.com. Pre-2020, this was not a pod. I was transcribing all of the interviews. So you can find all of them, hundreds of them, many hundreds of them, on the Songwriters on Process website. You'll find both the transcribed interviews and the pod there. Take a deep dive, spend a day. These are great conversations with songwriters just about the writing process. Also, my book, Desolation, a heavy metal memoir by Mark Morton with Benno Papari, is out now worldwide on Hachette Books. You can find it online in all major bookstores. Mark is a good friend. He is the guitarist in the metal band Lamb of God, and it's his memoir. Again, that is called Desolation, a heavy metal memoir by Mark Morton with Ben Opapari. I am biased, but that's a damn good book. My email, ben@songwritersonprocess.com. Send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love suggestions, questions, comments. People always email me and tell me who they want to see on the pod next. You never know. Send me an email, ben@songwritersonprocess.com. That's it for me, everyone. Have a great day.